Welcome to the May edition of The Compliance Life. This month I visit with Mark Beyer. Mark is the Chief Compliance Officer at the Pedernales Electrical Cooperative in the Hill Country of Texas. It is the largest electrical distribution cooperative in the United States. Mark has a very non-traditional background and journey to the CCO chair. He also has developed a compliance toolkit that he's learned in his various jobs leading up to his role as the CCO. I know you'll enjoy this month. In this concluding part 4, Mark moves into the CCO chair.
The Compliance Life details the journey to and in the role of a Chief Compliance Officer. How does one come to sit in the CCO chair? What are some of the skills a CCO needs to successfully navigate the compliance waters in any company? What are some of the top challenges CCOs have faced, and how did they meet them? These questions and many others will be explored in this new podcast series. The Compliance Life is hosted by Tom Fox, and each month he'll present the story of one CCO through 4 episodes. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back with Mark Beyer on The Compliance Life. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox back again with Mark Beyer for our 4th and final episode on the May edition of The Compliance Life. In this episode, Mark is going to step into the CCO chair. So Mark, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
So Mark, I will share with you the reason I moved to the Hill Country was because when I was 8 years old, I went to Camp Stewart and fell in love with the Hill Country. I was a Houston boy and had never seen hills before and thought this was the most beautiful place on earth. So when I finally got the chance, I moved out here. What was your reason for moving back to the Hill Country?
I didn't go to Camp Stewart, but similar. I went to college in the Hill Country, spent my time there in San Marcos, and have essentially vacationed exclusively in the Hill Country ever since. Always kind of looked at it as a vacation spot. Always wanting to live here, never seeing an opportunity necessarily or a easy way to do it. COVID happened, remote work increased, other opportunities happened, but in this case, PEC, the Pedernales Electric Cooperative, was in need of a ethics and compliance officer, and lucky enough, I was lucky enough to get that opportunity, jumped on the opportunity to move back to the Hill Country, me and my family are loving it.
So except for my life in graduate school and law school, I've always lived in the state of Texas. And electric cooperatives are ubiquitous across the state of Texas. They're well known. What I don't know is if they are as well known and well used outside the state of Texas. So for those who may not know what an electrical cooperative is, could you tell our listeners what it is and then really what the Pedernales Electrical Cooperative is as well?
History of, I guess, PC a little bit. 75 years ago or so, in the Hill Country, in rural areas like this, they're very limited electric, very limited power, if any. And so farmers, ranchers decided, let's get together and do it ourselves. And with a little bit of help of the federal government from a finance perspective, they formed PEC, the Pedernales Electric Cooperative, which is a member-owned, essentially a member-owned electric utility, electric distribution utility primarily. But which means that it's a nonprofit organization owned by the people that pay for power. So all the houses and businesses in the Texas Hill Country are members. We don't call them customers; we call them members, which essentially are owners of the organization. They elect board members to represent them in front of the company, the organization, to drive the strategy and to make the larger business decisions. But very interesting business model, very different than what I've come from, from Lockheed Martin to Baker Hughes to Livanova, all publicly traded companies. In this case, a nonprofit, member-owned, no sales function. It's not what they do. What we do, we provide low-cost, reliable, safe energy. So yeah, very interesting industry to be in.
So, what are some of the unique, or what I would perceive to be unique challenges for an ethics and compliance officer for not only at a nonprofit, but at an electrical cooperative that you saw in a publicly traded company or that any of the publicly traded companies you work for when Baker Hughes was private?
Yeah, there are several big differences. Some positive, or most of them are positive, I'd say, in terms of compliance risk. But there are very different compliance risks here than there were at other organizations I've been at. Um, like I said earlier, lack of a sales staff, lack of a sales function. Um, there's the sales risks, right? The what do salespeople do to get sales side of things goes away, and so then, but what's more and more of a risk in organizations like this are reputational, really, in many cases, because we have all the members, looking at us on a daily basis, looking at our line workers and our member relations folks and all employees that are wearing the logo around town, and being in Central Texas and in a rural area, as you know, everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows everyone's business, and so it's very important to not find yourself or ourselves either doing things that can potentially damage the reputation of the organization and weigh negatively on PEC in the community. And so that's very important to us. And so behavior of our employees is something that we take very seriously, both while they're at work as well as when they're wearing a t-shirt or a hat outside of work. We have to be very, very, we have to always be on our game, I'd say, relative to that. So conflicts of interest are another area where risk is different. It is a rural environment, generally speaking, on the kind of I'd say southwest side of Austin. If you're not familiar with the Hill Country, but where we have to really pay attention to making sure conflicts of interest don't get in the way and become a driving factor for employees making decisions that they shouldn't be making or otherwise wouldn't benefit them rather than benefiting the cooperative. So a lot of risk difference, not only from the nonprofit side, but from the cooperative business model side.
Mark, I may have to put you on the speaker circuit. You just said so much in the last 3 minutes that every compliance officer really needs to think about and put into play into their program. So I'm going to follow up on some of those things. The first one is your customer base or your member base, probably more correctly, of largely rural users of the cooperative. There's a university in Kerrville, Schreiner University. I've interviewed the head of the MBA program, and they try to put out candidates who can go to work into the Hill Country. And he said in surveying the businesses who hire his MBA grads, the number one thing they want is someone who do business ethically. And I heard you talk about that in terms of your member base really expects that as well. So here, the values are not simply up and down the organization, but they're horizontal as well across your member base and across the base of your third parties that you do business with. But you even went a step further because you talked about when they're wearing our hat, when they're wearing our shirt, when they're driving our truck. People expect a certain level of ethical behavior from us, and if they don't get that, the sanction is not going to be a regulatory body coming down on us. It's going to be a member calling up. And, in the rural world, raising hell. just quite simply. And that really is a different kind of challenge. But the message you gave us was if you live your values, that's one way to approach it. And I didn't hear you talk about policies and procedures and training. I heard you talking about values and really living those. Would that be kind of a fair assessment of what you said?
Yeah, 100%. So we have, several policies and procedures like organizations do. But you can have, policies all day long, and you can train people all day long. But unless people do it, and unless people have that moral courage to act in certain ways, in the right way, and understand what right is, in a sense, for the organization based on the values that the organization set, you're not getting anywhere. So it is truly up to each individual employee to live those values and to understand how their actions and behavior represents the cooperative and could potentially impact the success of the cooperative. When you're not reliant on your sales pitch to help your financial situation, we are reliant on members continuing to trust that we are doing what we doing the right thing to keep the power on for them. And as long as people keep moving to the hill country, then we're here to serve those members. We have no other means of revenue streams or ways to make money. It's a nonprofit, so we don't generate a profit. Any funding, any money that we get that exceeds our cost essentially goes back to the membership. So the motivation for bad behavior really isn't financial in that sense. It's really reputational. It's really how do we come across to our membership, and that's not only the people out there, the line workers or whoever, but it's the people in the offices as well, making sure we're using our expenses in the right way, making sure we're paying for services in the right way, not ordering out lunch and expensing it every day for no reason, that kind of stuff, making sure we're smart stewards of our members' money and ultimately trust.
I'm going to revise my prior remarks because you just said the most important thing I've heard you say: stewards of our members. And when a compliance officer, and when the employees start thinking about your stakeholders that you are stewards for, Mark, that's just a fabulous way to communicate a message. So all I can say is kudos. As in all jobs that you have had, you have learned and you've added to your compliance toolkit. And if that was it strikes me that that's true also at the PEC. And if that's correct, what have you added to your toolkit, and how have you used that in your role as ethics and compliance officer?
I've only been with PEC for almost a year and a half at this point, so not too long, but have learned quite a bit and have grown a few tools, I would say. One is the importance of relationships. When you're in a global organization like a Lockheed Martin or Livanova or what have you, relationships are always important internally, I'd say, to the person sitting next to you or to your teammates. But in this case, the importance of relationships with everyone in the organization, in a sense, to get something done, and the importance of relationships with membership and your community, and the people in your community. That's a lesson that I'm continuing to learn every day, and the importance of it's not necessarily always what you're doing, it's who you're doing it with, right? Who you're involving in the decision-making process, who you're consulting with and informing is very important. The other side is, I mentioned earlier, one thing that I've always tried to do is be a value to the organization, and that's always it generally comes with flexibility and finding those pockets of areas where maybe there's less knowledge in the organization, or there's somebody that needs to fill that gap, or whatever it is. At Lockheed, it was hazardous material shipping, for instance. At Baker Hughes, it was something else. Here, it's privacy. We take privacy very seriously here at the cooperative, and so I've really tried to privacy information security to kind of go down the path of learning as much as I can, taking as many trainings and webinars and conferences and really kind of brushing up on being as much of an expert as I can, or getting there at least, in terms of privacy and information security, because that's where that's an area where the organization always needs to be focusing on. And we do every day, but we can always get better in protecting the privacy of our employees and our members, and ensuring that our processes are aligned with the value of respecting that.
Thing I wanted to maybe end with, Mark, on your thoughts is, where do you see not only yourself going forward, but really the chair you sit in, the role you're fulfilling now? How do you see that maybe down the road, 2025, or perhaps even beyond?
Yeah, so I mean, the PEC is a incredibly fast-growing organization for an electric cooperative. My understanding is electric cooperatives generally, have stagnant growth or small growth, or maybe even decline. In our case, we are shockingly we are growing at a shocking pace. Meter growth, member growth, and that's that's a testament to how everyone wants to live in the Hill Country, right? I mean,
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox.
If you know
Thank
the
you again
area,
for
the growth
listening to
outside
this
of
episode
Austin,
of The Compliance Life.
down.
I hope you'll
Marble
join
Falls,
me again next week, where I take up another
it's
episode.
growing tremendously. So the organization is having to grow as well from an ethics and compliance side, and so most electric cooperatives probably do not have my role, only because of the size of the organization, and their kind of their risks. But our risks, while we are an electric cooperative, we share kind of the structural risks of larger organizations. And so as we grow, the need for this grows as well, and the challenges of society and the individuals that we are bringing into the workforce. The differences between our more experienced employees to the apprentices and the new people that are coming in now, their expectations of what the organization should be doing are very different. And so having to find ways to align those values and communicate our values so that ultimately we are representing the organization in a consistent way is going to be a challenge, and one that I'm looking forward to tackling, or helping tackle, is really finding a way to the ways to impact our culture and to continue to evolve our culture to meet those new challenges here in the coming years.
Well, Mark, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. This has been a fascinating exploration of a frankly very unique compliance life on this month's edition of The Compliance Life. I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me over these 4 episodes. But before we leave, if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself or any of the topics you've touched on, including the PEC, what would be the best way for them to find out?
Yeah, you can go to my LinkedIn profile, or you can just shoot me an email, mark.beyer@peci.com.
Mark, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me over this series.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Compliance Life. I hope you'll join me again next week, where I take up another episode in The Compliance Life. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you would like to be featured on The Compliance Life, please give me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you like this series, please give us a rating on iTunes. Any review and rating would definitely help get the word out about the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks again.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.